What if I told you that the image you have of a political election is really only half the story? Seriously, what if I told you that US elections are not just won on voting day? They're actually won months, sometimes literally years, before a single vote is ever cast. Welcome to today's Explainer. I am so excited to dive into this with you because we are looking way past the podiums. We're ignoring the fiery speeches and the televised debates, and we are looking at the strategies you never see. Today, we're going entirely behind the scenes.
So think about it. Are elections just won on voting day? Most of us are completely conditioned to think of them as this single monumental event, right? We picture the long lines at polling stations, the volunteers handing out those little I voted stickers, and the dramatic late-night tallying on the news. We kind of assume that this one day is when the magic happens, when the winner is actually decided. But what if that's really just the final visible step of a much, much longer hidden process?
The reality is, they're won months and sometimes years before a single vote is cast. From absolute data warfare to massive media influence to silent funding battles, this is how modern US elections are actually won. And I promise you, once you see the sheer scale of the engineering happening behind the scenes, you will never look at an election the exact same way again. The outcome you see on election night, it's really just the result of groundwork laid out long in advance.
Okay, let's jump into section 1, the data game, or precision influence over popularity.
We often think of elections as these giant high school popularity contests on a massive scale. But modern elections aren't just powered by smiles and handshakes. They are entirely powered by data. Every single voter is categorized. And I don't just mean your age or your income bracket. Campaign teams are actually building complex psychological profiles on us. They track your fears, your core beliefs, and your emotional triggers. They're essentially trying to figure out the exact recipe of what makes you angry, what makes you hopeful, and most importantly, what actually gets you off the couch to go vote.
And that brings us to a really crucial concept, micro-targeting. Basically, this is the practice of delivering highly customized political messages designed for a specific individual, all based on their unique psychological profile. They take all that data we just talked about and they weaponize it. This isn't your traditional old-school campaigning where a politician stands on a soapbox shouting a generic message to a giant crowd. No way. This is precision influence, engineered specifically for you.
Let's imagine how this plays out in the real world. Say you have two neighbors living right next door to each other. Neighbor A sits down and watches a political ad that has been algorithmically designed to tap directly into their specific anxieties and fears. Meanwhile, neighbor B, literally right next door, watches a completely different ad tailored entirely to their optimism and hopes for the future. You've got two people on the exact same street experiencing two entirely different political realities, both engineered by the exact same campaign.
Which brings us to our next major pillar, section 2, money power and the hidden financial engine.
Because to gather all that data and run all those highly specific ads, you need resources, like a lot of resources, billions. That is the sheer scale of the dollars flowing quietly into these campaigns. It is a staggering amount of money, and it acts as the quiet power deciding which messages get amplified and which narratives are allowed to dominate the airwaves. This isn't just about paying for yard signs. It's about funding a massive, continuous operation of influence.
So where does all this cash actually come from? Well, these billions flow through highly structured financial conduits, super PACs, super wealthy private donors, and deeply entrenched lobby groups. This is the absolute lifeblood of the election machinery. And the real story here is that so much of this influence happens completely out of the public eye, quietly securing visibility for the candidates they back. It all breaks down into a really simple, undeniable formula. Step 1, more money. Step 2, more visibility, which basically means deciding how often a candidate is seen and exactly where those micro-targeted ads are shown. And step 3, more influence. In the political arena, visibility is basically oxygen, and money is exactly what buys that oxygen. Right, let's look at how that influence is actually deployed. Section 3, media and narrative control, or engineering perception.
Elections, at their very core, are not always about objective reality. They are about engineered perception. Media coverage has this incredible power. It can literally build a hero out of nowhere, destroy a decades-long reputation in a single afternoon, and shift public opinion completely overnight. And how do they do it? Through carefully designed events. First, strategic leaks of information. Next, perfectly timed controversies to either distract or damage. And finally, manufactured viral moments. None of this is an accident, guys. It is all deliberately designed to control the narrative. In the absolute heat of an election, humans are narrative creatures. The story people believe matters way more than facts alone. A compelling, emotionally resonant story is almost always going to outpace a dry list of facts and figures. Campaigns know this, and they engineer their narratives accordingly to shape the exact lens through which you view the world.
So let's see how this builds on the ground level. Section 4. Ground Game and Psychology. The Silent Army.
Way behind the bright spotlight of the candidate, there are thousands of people operating in the shadows. Volunteers knocking on doors, call centers gently nudging undecided voters, and local influencers subtly shaping community opinions. And what is this silent army actually doing? They are weaponizing human psychology. Their interactions heavily rely on 3 specific triggers: creating an immediate sense of urgency, tapping into the fear of loss, or pushing the hope for change. Why? Because as much as we love to think we are deeply rational creatures, people generally do not vote logically. They vote emotionally. And campaigns are masterful at pulling those exact levers.
Which brings us to the climax of this whole system. Section 5. Swing State Strategy. The ultimate systemic twist. So after all the data, the money, the media, and the psychology, we hit a structural reality that totally disrupts a very common belief. We all kind of hold on to this widely held illusion that every single vote matters equally across the board, right? But the stark reality is that campaigns actually focus heavily on just a few regions, a few specific demographics, and sometimes down to just a few thousand targeted voters in battleground areas. Winning these very specific, highly concentrated areas can literally win the entire national election. So what does this all mean? Are elections fair? Well, yes. Ultimately, people do cast a vote. But what actually shapes that vote is a vastly complex system of influence, strategy, and power. Elections are not just won at the ballot box. They are engineered long before. The choice is yours, absolutely. But the menu of options and the way you feel about those options has been carefully curated. Now, this leaves us with one massive question. Are voters truly deciding, or are we being guided without even realizing it? Understanding this invisible system is the very first step to thinking independently. If you found this explainer